The Schedule A will be completed by the RLPL prior to sending the SLA to the sponsor. There may be times the SLA is received and there is no start date, as the date will be filled in after the authorization or obligation of the funds has been received. As part of the DOT's process with FHWA, the receipt of a locally executed SLA is required prior to the request of the federal funds. Within the contract start date and end date is the time frame that eligible expenditures are reimbursable. The agreement indicates if the SLA received is an original standard agreement or, quote, a supplemental. The agreement type is further broken down by type to determine who is administering the phases within the Schedule A. There are some cases where a project may be administered by NYSDOT, but the cost of the project is shared by more than one municipality. If more than one municipality are covering the cost of the project, then a separate SLA would be initiated for each municipality and their share of the funds for the phase. The Schedule A will indicate which phases apply. In this example, the project is in the preliminary engineering or design and right-of-way incidental phases. When you are reviewing Schedule A, confirm work type from pull-down list and make sure the county is correct. The RLPL will indicate whether the project is eligible for Marchiselli funds. Chapter 3 of the Local Projects Manual provides more detail as to what type of projects and fund sources are eligible and not eligible for Marchiselli. Continuing down Schedule A. The schedule shows the 9-digit PIN. The sub-PIN, or the last 3 digits of the PIN, allocates the overall funding amount into separate phases. The PIN numbers indicate the funding phase. The .121 PIN indicates this funding amount is for the engineering or design phase. The .221 PIN indicates this is funding for the right-of-way phase, and the .321 PIN indicates this is funding for the construction phase. This is not shown in this Schedule A example. Quote, current indicates what is to be under agreement and what will be available for reimbursement. If a cost is shown in the quote, old, it would be that a supplemental agreement is being processed and additional funds were included. The federal funding column indicates the funding source and the percentage breakdown of the federal aid. Most federal funds are reimbursed at 80%. Then the federal participating share shown as 80% of the total, which in this case, the federal share is $80,000 since the total funding is $100,000. If the project is not eligible for Marchiselli funding, the federal share is 80% and non-federal share or local share is 20%. However, as this project is eligible for Marchiselli funding, the state matching share is 75% of the non-federal share or 15% of the total funding. Most projects are 80% federal and 20% non-federal. 75% of 20% is 15%, but it is easier to say 80/15/5. If the project has a state-administered phase, the last column would be the non-federal share or 20% deposit required from the sponsor. Some projects have multiple fund sources. In this example, the project has 2 funding sources, NHPP and HPP funding. HPP funds are not eligible for Marchiselli. Therefore, the split will be 80-20 between federal and local with no state share from Marchiselli. To distinguish between the 2 different fund sources, the Schedule A has two right-of-way pins, 123,456.221 and 123,456.222, one right-of-way pin for each funding source of the right-of-way phase. On page 2 of the Schedule A, if there was a deposit required as shown in the local deposit amount column, it would be reiterated here in Box B. Box C is all the totals from Box A on page 1. The values in Box C are automatically calculated. Box D is a point of contact if there are questions regarding the information within the agreement and Schedule A. Sometimes this is the actual person who puts the agreement together and not necessarily the RLPL who may have sent it to the sponsor. Schedule A does not require signature. This refers you back to the agreement or the supplemental agreement cover to ensure the required signatures are obtained. Sometimes additional information is needed to explain a particular situation or expand on the information within the Schedule A. Therefore, we have a section for footnotes. This area can be used to provide a description of the project, explain more about the funding source, and any specified time frame requirements.